Welcome to Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery. I am Mark, the creator of this channel and the author of all works presented on it. Enjoy these programs, but remember that I retain the copyright to them. All life long, I've had a rich imagination. It has been easy for me to fashion literary pieces, even impromptu. Ideas for stories frequently flash through my mind. But I committed none of them to paper until one day about 15 years ago. Frankly, I don't recall the motivation at the time. The story was not outstanding. Nevertheless, that act of creation inspired me to continue. During the following year and a half, I composed 75 short stories of varying quality, of course. And the one that you're about to hear is the one that, it's the spark that triggered an explosion of literature. It is entitled The Great One. Aquino was in his 4th year when he saw the rock for the first time. Perhaps it really wasn't the first time, but in later life he could recall no earlier encounter. One of Mugowo's arms held him tightly, while the other pointed to the massive granite object atop the mountain. In a low monotone, Mugowo said, "Great Stone Spirit." The softness and gravity of his father's voice signaled distinctly that the monolith commanded veneration. From this moment, the event burned brightly in the boy's mind. During ensuing years, Aquino noted that villagers always spoke of the rock with hushed breath. He wondered why the voices should be so soft when the rock was so hard. It seemed that the people were trying to make their words tiptoe silently past the great object. Could it be asleep, and they didn't wish to awaken it? In time, Aquino came to understand the actions of the people. Clearly, they did not believe the stone to be sleeping. To them, it was alive, vigilant, and very patient. It did not move because it did not need to move. From a lofty perch directly above the village, it surveyed all below it in the valley and all on the bluff upon which it rested. It knew everything that happened in the world. The villagers marveled at the ponderous mass of the boulder, but they feared its might. Lying right edge of the cliff, it had the power to, if it willed, to crash down upon them. Chief Watiba and the elders spent hours discussing the Great One. All agreed that the stone must be honored, but they disagreed about its character. Most, including Watiba, regarded the rock as a powerful deity, strategically positioned to protect the village. A few suspected that it was a monster, awaiting the most advantageous moment to destroy them. The dissenters implored the chief to move the village. Why remain in the very spot where the Great One could inflict maximum damage? The majority always prevailed. How could they deny Watiba's argument that the only source of water in the entire valley lay there at the foot of the cliff? Throughout boyhood, Aquino heard the quarrels, but he could not decide the truth. When imagining the boulder as a giant demon choosing the right moment to hurtle itself down upon them, he grew exceedingly frightened. But when thinking of it as an indomitable sentinel constantly on guard to defend him, he felt secure and at ease. The truth really didn't matter. It was his duty to believe and obey the elders. Most of the time, he went about unperturbed. But once in a while, when he looked up, The rock seemed to display a visage with brutal features. At such moments, Aquino dared to wonder if the elders truly understood. The villagers employed various means to appease the Great One. They offered daily libations and prayers. At special times, including especially the solstices and equinoxes, all but the disabled followed the tortuous path to the top of the cliff. There, adjacent to the Great One, they prostrated themselves and worshipped its mighty spirit. On these occasions, Aquino said the appropriate words of praise, but his heart was not in them. Repeatedly, he had to suppress an urge to ask the rock, "Are you evil?" The few who took an ominous view of the stone continued to press Wabita. When Aquino was 10, they formulated a new plan of action. Instead of moving the village, why not move the rock? With some effort, the boulder could be pushed over the cliff. Even if it destroyed the village, there would be no loss of life. The Great One would remain in their midst, where it could be worshipped forever. Many who had sided previously with the majority now favored this proposal. Soon, even Wabita and the elders relented. They waited for the autumnal equinox. On that day, early in the morning, all the able-bodied villagers mounted the heights. Aquino aided Malaba, a feeble old man who wanted to participate, although the climb caused him great pain. On the bluff, beside the Great One, the people stretched their bodies down upon the earth and beseeched the spirit of the stone to condone and sanctify their actions. After offering sacrifices, they prepared to consummate the plan. Against the massive boulder, they applied poles, crude implements, and human muscles, but the rock refused to budge. They sweated, strained, and bled for hours. The rock remained intransigent. Finally, Wabita signaled an end to the attempt. He said, "It is the will of the Great One to stay here. So be it." More prayers were offered. Then the people returned to the village. Nearly all agreed that the Great One had spoken, and when he failed to punish them for their sacrilege, all concluded that he possessed a benevolent nature. All except Aquino. To him it seemed at times that the stone still displayed a savage face. During the next 3 years, occasional showers of pebbles and dirt descended upon the village from the mountain. Aquino wondered if the Great One was spitting in derision. When he asked old Nahu, the wise man just smiled and walked away. Approaching manhood, Aquino began to grow taller and stronger than his peers. He invariably won contests of speed and strength. With these new powers, he gained in self-confidence. A streak of independence, which he had always kept internally, now began to manifest itself to others. Mogowo warned him that the Great One was watching. Despite these admonitions, Aquino deviated at times from accepted ways. This was due in part to the influence of his good friend Lanubal, a boisterous youth 2 years older than he. Though physically and mentally inferior to Aquino, Lanubal won the admiration of his young companion through boldness and impetuosity, inspired by a burning desire to impress his father, Oyo, a renowned hunter. In their zeal to excel, Lanubal and Aquino violated a cardinal tribal convention. They hunted before earning that privilege. As punishment, the elders made the transgressors spend 2 days in a canyon without food or water. Although the two young men were linked by personality, they differed from one another in one important respect. Lanuble freely expressed his innermost thoughts, even those that defied tradition. He often boasted that he would become a hunter as mighty as his father. Once, when the two young men were alone, he declared that he would surpass the gods. Shocked by these words, Aquino gave a fearful glance at the Great One. One day, at age 15, Aquino learned that Oyo had died unexpectedly. He wanted to comfort his friend, but people said that the grief-stricken Lanuble had abandoned the village. In the morning, 2 days later, a woman wailing awakened everyone. She had gone very early to the spring to fetch water. Near that source of life, she had discovered the shattered body of Lanuble. Clearly, the young man had fallen from the boulder above. Knowing the youth's love for his father, everyone concluded that Lanuble had hurled himself off the Great One. In sorrow, Aquino searched his mind for an explanation of his friend's tragic end. He could not accept the tale of the villagers. Aquino suspected that the gods had punished Lanuble for blasphemy. Somehow, the Great One had lured his friend to the top of the mountain and then had cast him into the void. This speculation led to a troubling thought. If vengeance was inflicted on Lanuble for spoken words, might he too not suffer for silent thoughts? The longer he weighed this idea, the more certain Aquino became that he must make peace with the spirit above. One night, after all the villagers had gone to sleep, Aquino crawled out of his dwelling, creeping past Mogowo and the others who lay on the ground. The air was cold, but he scarcely noticed. His mind focused on the imminent encounter. In the darkness, he struggled to maintain footing on the cliff as he took the trail to the top of the mountain. At the site on the bluff where villagers normally paid homage to the Great One, Aquino prostrated himself. For an hour he lay motionless, while softly whispering a prayer. Upon arising, he placed gifts of food and flowers beside the great stone. Then he kneeled and solemnly implored the spirit to forgive his transgressions. A cold breeze that made him shiver did not seem a sign of divine exculpation, so he waited patiently. The moon moved a vast distance in the sky. Nothing disturbed the solitude. As dawn approached, Aquino was about to return to the village. Abruptly, he heard a voice. Or was it a voice? A low, plaintive tone issued from the rock. It resembled a human in torment. Aquino trembled. Was it the wind, or the spirit of the stone speaking to him? Aquino could distinguish no words. He remained on his knees, straining to comprehend. Slowly, a pain that began in the chest passed through the rest of the body. It was not the excruciating pain of a vindictive god. Rather, it was mild and melancholic. Suddenly, Aquino understood. The grim countenance that appeared from time to time on the boulder was an expression of sorrow, not of savagery. The Great One was suffering. The young man wanted to help the stone, but how? What caused the anguish? Quiet reflection led Aquino to conclude that the formidable object was not master of its world, but a prisoner of it. Trapped on the bluff, it suffered the ravages of wind and temperature without a soul to share its torment. Before abandoning the site, Aquino made a promise to the rock. "You will not be alone. I will be with you always." The young man slipped quietly back into the village. During the day, he has said nothing to others about his experience. About noon, a strong shower of rock and earth rained down upon the village. The people feared that the Great One was angry and might throw himself down upon them. After meeting in council, Chief Wabita and the elders commanded the villagers to collect 3 days of basic necessities. The entire population would temporarily retreat to the far end of the valley. There, all would perform a special tribute in honor of the Great Spirit. The journey took place in mid-afternoon. Along the way, Aquino parted silently from his people. To himself he declared, "I will keep my vow." In the abandoned village, he re-entered his dwelling. On the ground, before falling asleep, Aquino whispered upward in the direction of the Great One, "You and I are one. My destiny is yours." While he slept, the granite boulder began to stir, and then with one tremendous lunge, it thrust itself directly down the mountainside, like one exulting in the thrill of freedom. It landed with a devastating force and a deafening roar upon the abode of Aquino. The Great One would never move again. That's the end of that story. If you'll hold on for just a moment, I'll get you a second story. Now I offer a tale of a quite different variety. It begins in a harmless manner with the birth of a baby, but watch how it develops. Here is Baby Joe. 123 Placid Lane, Salem, Massachusetts, May 3rd, 1970. Dear Mother, I have some very big news. Please forgive me for not writing sooner, but Perry and I have had a hectic life for the last month. On the 1st of April, I gave birth to an 18-pound boy. We've named him Joseph. Mother, I know you and Dad always raised us kids to be independent. I remember that on my wedding day, you pledged never to interfere in my married life, and you have certainly honored that commitment. I haven't heard one word from you, or Dad for that matter, about how to raise Jeannie or Zeke. But Mother, now I want you to interfere. In fact, I urgently request your advice. This baby is different. In order for you to understand, I need to start at the beginning. On the birthday of baby Joe, that's what we call him, despite the pains of labor, I was very clear-headed. Like all expectant mothers, I looked forward to seeing a sweet, helpless, wrinkled creature emerging from my body. But that's not at all what I got. Seconds after Dr. Hammond completed the delivery, the infant pushed the doctor's hands away, rolled off the table, and stood on the floor. While everyone in the room gaped at him in amazement, baby Joe surveyed the room and winked at one of the nurses. And then, with a fist, he smashed the delivery table and demanded milk. By these acts, Mother, my child announced to the world the arrival of a unique and precocious human being. As you might imagine, none of the personnel at Salem General Hospital knew how to cope with him. Actually, the nursery attendants seemed to scurry about in fear for their lives. To the medical staff, our child soon became known as the sumo wrestler. With his bulging paunch, his well-developed muscles, and his flailing arms and legs, he appeared to be a grappler in training. What's more, he did extensive damage to the pediatric ward. During pregnancy, Perry and I had wondered about the developing embryo. At times, Joseph burped so loudly that a sound wave echoed about the room. On other occasions, he kicked with such force that my body bounced on the bed. Consequently, Perry and I were not totally surprised by what came from the womb. However, being of average weight and height, the two of us cannot account for the unusual size of our child. Ignorant of our family genealogy, we've speculated that through his dad, baby Joe may have inherited the genes of the great prizefighter John L. Sullivan. Perhaps Grandpa can tell us more about that. Two of Perry's local relations visited the hospital to view our infant. Cousin Calvin, who got a black eye trying to kiss the newborn, insisted that baby Joe was a mutant. Aunt Agatha, an avid astrologer, ascribed the child's dimensions to misalignment of the dog star and the Great Bear. The orderly, who broke a hand trying to put the baby in bed, attributed Joseph's qualities to the witchcraft of Salem's past. All parents love to see attention heaped upon their precious little ones, but to Perry and me, baby Joe is an embarrassment. His antics produce sheepish grins on our faces, not genuine smiles. We spend much time apologizing and paying for his excesses. For example, last week, as Nurse Livingston bent over to pick up a diaper, our child jabbed her in the rear end with a diaper pin. Later, he told us that he just couldn't resist the opportunity. How we dreaded the day when we had to take him from the hospital. From then on, we would have sole responsibility for baby Joe. In the car on the way home, he smashed a window in order to get her a better look at the scenery. We explained diplomatically how to get the same result by pushing a button. He grumbled, much easier just to smash the window. It's not unnatural for infants to awaken their parents at inconvenient hours of the night in order to satisfy their bodily needs. But baby Joe has manifested unorthodox needs and unorthodox demands. For example, at 2 a.m. Wednesday morning, he aroused the whole household and announced that he wanted a weenie roast in the backyard at once. Furthermore, if he didn't get it, he was going to pee all over my favorite roses. The four of us sat shivering while baby Joe consumed 7 hot dogs. Poor Jeannie caught a cold. I think I've said enough so that you can understand our problems. There is no child on earth like baby Joe. Although he's just 1 month old, Perry and I fear how he will develop. Please send advice immediately. Love from your distressed daughter, Molly Sullivan. P.S. Please pray for us. 123 Placid Lane, Salem, Massachusetts, October 15th, 1970. Dear Chief Axelrod, I understand clearly that the duty of a police chief is to enforce the laws of his city, and that his responsibilities do not extend to private matters within families. However, the unusual situation in my household has the potential to obliterate your city. Consider this letter both a warning and a desperate plea for advice. I have a 6-month-old son named Joseph. To say that he is precocious would truly be an understatement. At 6 weeks, he had teeth like truck chains. Now, at 6 months, he opens coconuts by cracking them on his head. Believe me, my wife and I know our limits. When baby Joe says he wants something, we hasten to satisfy his requests. Once, when he was about 3 months old, I dared to challenge him. He raised me over his head, swung me around several times, and threw me against the wall. I still have a scar to prove it. If you're a little slow in learning, maybe you haven't figured out that baby Joe rules the Sullivan family. In fact, he's a tyrant. Long ago, he decided that things should be done his way and for his advantage. Last month, he made my wife and me trade rooms with him. Now he has the king-size bed and the giant screen TV all to himself. Molly and I share a twin bed in the nursery. In many a family, sibling rivalry is a major problem. Not in our family. Big brother Zeke and big sister Jeannie know their places. When Zeke once complained about Joe's using his bike, the latter twisted the bike into the shape of a pretzel. On another occasion, Jeannie lamented that Joe had been given more ice cream than she. The baby responded by smearing her face with ice cream and by ramming a banana down her throat. Molly and I know that our child's behavior, though outrageous, is nevertheless outside the law and your jurisdiction. However, by stretching your imagination, you might be able to see where this might lead. You undoubtedly have had experience with juvenile delinquents. What advice can you offer, even if our child is only 6 months old? Don't tell us later that you haven't been warned. Sincerely, Perry Sullivan. P.S. Halloween is just a couple of weeks from now. Need I say more? 123 Placid Lane, Salem, Massachusetts, January 23, 1971. Dear Mother, baby Joe is now 9 months old. He continues to grow at an astounding rate. I can't say that his aggressiveness is under control, but it has assumed a more subtle form. Perry nixed your suggestion that we take the child to a psychiatrist. He said that he feared for the life of the psychiatrist, and frankly, I think that he's right. Nevertheless, baby Joe's behavior has taken an unexpected turn for the better. Perry and I took a huge risk for Jeannie's birthday. We let her invite friends to a party at our house. When the guests arrived, baby Joe stunned us with his comportment. He cooed and giggled and did all the cute little things that normal infants do. I couldn't believe my ears to hear one mother exclaim, "Isn't he sweet?" After the guests had departed, Perry and I asked baby Joe to explain his behavior. The reply was revealing. He said, "It's a matter of image. I've been watching TV, and I note that people of my age are expected to act a certain way. I don't know why they do all those silly things, but that's how it is. Anyway, it's smart to have an advantage over others. Don't show all your cards until you're ready to play the hand." Ever since that day, Perry and I have been able to expect proper behavior whenever our child, excuse me, just a second here. Okay, Perry and I have been able to expect proper behavior whenever our child is in public. At home, it's a wholly different matter. Juvenile despotism persists, and that oppression can assume many forms. After viewing King Kong on television one night, baby Joe forced the whole family watch him demolish the kitchen and then vote for the best act of destruction. When Jeannie was late fixing his lunch one day, the brute swallowed all the koi in the backyard pond. Yesterday, Baby Joe ordered Perry to hand over his paycheck. Henceforth, he will decide how the family's money will be spent. Mother, if you have any other good ideas, please send them to me. By the way, please enclose some stamps in the next letter. I'm not sure that my allowance from Baby Joe can cover postage. Love, Molly. 123 Placid Lane, Salem, Massachusetts, October 2nd, 1971. Dear Chief Axelrod, once again, I appeal to you for advice on managing my son. I realize that he has committed no crimes of which you are aware. Actually, he has committed many crimes, but he's very clever. That $35,000 damage on Halloween and the $60,000 damage on New Year's Eve, attributed by the Salem Times to unknown vandals, was clearly the work of Baby Joe. You just don't understand what I have on my hands. Consider his first birthday. On that day, he measured 4 feet tall and weighed 100 pounds. For presents, my wife and I gave him the barbells he demanded. We barely scraped together the money for them from the meager allowance he gave us. Cutting the 5-tiered birthday cake, Baby Joe allotted each of us family members a portion that would feed a pigeon. And then, without touching a fork or knife, he devoured the rest of the cake in the time it would take to toast a marshmallow. Surprisingly, he thanked Molly for a wonderful meal. Later, he asked me to make the day perfect by going out to buy him a box of cigars. It's true that Baby Joe has committed no overt criminal acts that would attract your attention, but can't you see the potential for great mischief? Surely you remember the incident reported to the police last week. One night, as our family slept, thieves broke into our house. Our 2 older children, Zeke and Jeannie, hid under their beds, while my wife and I hid in the closet. Before hiding, Zeke managed to whisper into his younger brother's ear that bad men were in the house to steal our possessions. Grunting, "We'll see about that," Baby Joe stomped downstairs. Soon we heard shouting, screaming, and crashing sounds. Hoping to save our child, my wife Molly rushed to a bedside phone. Picking up the receiver, she heard one of the thieves pleading desperately with the police to come and arrest him. If the thieves of this community can't handle our son, who can? Tell me what to do. Sincerely, Perry Sullivan. 123 Placid Lane, Salem, Massachusetts, April 2nd, 1972. Director John Heath, FBI Headquarters, Washington, D.C. Dear Director Heath, I must warn you of a significant threat to our national security. As incredible as it may seem, the danger exists in the form of my 2-year-old son Joseph, who is utterly free from the control of his mother and me. I have previously alerted the local police chief, but he is too slow to grasp the gravity of the matter. You, on the other hand, are surely better prepared to oppose Herculean foes, and only you possess the resources to confront a menace of this scale. My wife and I measured Joseph on his 2nd birthday. He was 6 feet tall, and he weighed 200 pounds. For a present, we gave him the boxing gloves he demanded. After receiving the gift, Baby Joe ordered the family outdoors. In the backyard, he tested out the gloves by punching holes through our brick wall. Then he told us to sit down, for he had something to say. Here I paraphrase his words. I'm 2 years old now. It's time to make my mark in the world. I've been thinking that I should start small and work my way up to bigger things. My first project will be to reorganize this community under my leadership. I'm uncertain about what form to give it. A social commune, a mafia family, and a terrorist cell are all possibilities. However, I see a major obstacle in my path. It's a problem of perception. Despite my considerable physique, I can now bench press 500 pounds with one arm. Some adults with limited views may hesitate to accept my authority. So I'd like to ask if you have any suggestions to make. My wife and I stared at one another in disbelief. Without speaking a word, we communicated the thought, "What have we spawned?" At the same time, we were flabbergasted that Baby Joe would seek advice from us. Normally, he dictated. But given this opportunity, I chose to employ a dilatory strategy. My words were, it would be best to approach the problem scientifically. Give Mama and me a chance to sound public opinion first, and then you'll have a better basis for a decision. His reply was ominous. I'll give you 1 month. After that, I'll act. At this moment, I'm leaning towards the creation of a secret society with extensive outreach. That ultimatum was delivered yesterday. The clock is ticking. I implore you to act immediately. Sincerely, Perry Sullivan. 123 Placid Lane, Salem, Massachusetts, April 2nd, 1973. President Walter Travis, White House, Washington, D.C. Dear President Travis, thank you so much for letting my wife and me attend yesterday's launch at Cape Canaveral. We really wanted to wish our son well on his voyage to Mars. Please thank Secretary of Defense Sandoval for devising this clever scheme for ridding planet Earth of the Baby Joe problem. Send our appreciation also to Senator Morrison for sponsoring the bill that created the Federal Baby Space Agency. We understand fully the heat that you and your party have taken from reporters and political opponents. In retrospect, it appears that the world has just dodged a bullet, something like the Cuban Missile Crisis or the Earth's near collision with an asteroid a few years ago. From the time of our son's birth, we've repeatedly warned authorities of the grave threat he posed. No one seemed to listen, and then when all appeared lost, you and other federal officials suddenly sprang into action. We're still uncertain what triggered your response. Was it the FBI's discovery of the nationwide network of subversives led by an unknown person in Salem? Could it have been the bomb engraved with the letters BJ found under the Attorney General's car only hours before he was to deliver an anti-crime address? Or was it the letter addressed to you recommending that you relinquish power to our son? It's perfectly clear to Mrs. Sullivan and me why you had to resort to devious methods to solve the problem. That absurd article by Rich Collins in the Washington Post, Toddler Travesty, aroused great public ire, and that Million Mothers March when you brought Baby Joe to the Capitol for questioning. Only people who don't know our son could treat him as an ordinary child. Lawmakers could not enact legislation to imprison a 3-year-old child, but creating a baby space agency with a single astronaut was a stroke of genius. Not only did it offer the nation an avenue of escape, but a lure for the deviant one himself. Baby Joe was thrilled to learn that he had been selected as the sole participant in a space venture designed exclusively for him. He was starting life literally at the top. Despite all the positives of this project, my wife and I share concerns that we think should be passed on to you. During training, Baby Joe often startled supervisors with outbursts of laughter for which he offered no explanations. But in private, he hinted to us that he was planting revisions in the flight plan, whatever that meant. Yesterday's launch coincided with Baby Joe's 3rd birthday. Officially, he measured 7 feet 6 inches and weighed 360 pounds. He looked more fit than an NBA MVP. The spaceship had been enlarged to contain a growing frame, and provisions had been made for a 5-year mission. Privately, Baby Joe told us that the trip would take much longer and that he had made arrangements for the extension. You and your national security advisors might wish to reflect on this. Sincerely, Perry and Molly Sullivan. Cape Canaveral, Florida, April 1, 1973. President Walter Travis, White House, Washington, D.C. Dear President Travis, shortly before launch today, I asked a Cape Canaveral official to deliver this message to you after takeoff. By now, scientists at the Houston Space Center have informed you that they have no control over my spacecraft. That is because I have altered the mechanism to give myself full control. I have also opted to alter the plans made for my mission. Those scientists think too small. I have grander things in mind. My mission will be longer and wider in scope. On Mars, I plan to construct an incredible device that will change the universe. Expect me to return to Earth about 2020. Please inform world leaders that I plan to take charge of the planet at that time. Baby Joe. All right. I trust this story won't discourage you from having children. The odds of producing a Baby Joe cannot exceed 1 in a Google, that is, 10 to the 100th power. Hope you had much fun hearing this absurd tale as I did writing it. Thank you for watching Dramas, Dreams, and Drollery.